PikcioChain is a way of digitally managing identities, and in this video, I interviewed the CEO of PikcioChain, Didier. So we asked about key questions of why use PikcioChain to manage identities, how it's going to move forward, and what the PikcioChain is about. I do want to say I have a video covering the basics of PikcioChain. I'll put a link up there, and it explains kind of roughly what this project is about, and this video goes into a little bit more detail. I do want to say that this is a sponsored video, and ICOs are extremely volatile, so do your own research, guys. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm here with Didier, the CEO of PikcioChain. So Didier, can you tell me a little bit about what PikcioChain is trying to do?
Okay, hi, thank you for having me. So the PikcioChain is trying to address the various challenges that both individuals and companies have regarding personal data or customer data when it's a company. As we've seen lately with the Facebook issues, personal data is something that people consider very important, but sometimes some companies don't really pay really attention or the way you would expect to these, or for another, have other goals basically with your data. And these challenges are many. So there is obviously regulation. There's a little bit loose in the US, except for banking and healthcare data. They're pretty constraining in Europe with a coming regulation called GDPR. But all over the world, there is that perception by individuals and more in the digital world that these personal data should have some kind of privacy rules or privacy rights. That's on one hand, but what's more and more surprising, so to speak, is that companies also begins to have serious challenges with these customer data. One is, of course, complying with regulation, and hopefully we'll have some in the US as well that way, but also security. We have hacking every single day. And at the end of the day, also how to have quality data, because when you have more and more cases of hacking and or misuse of your information, you as an individual tend to kind of have strategies to mask yourself or disguise yourself, etc. And that generates, in a growing amount of data, it's generating a lot of bad quality data. So for companies who invest a lot in that to collect these data and try to use them, there is now an additional expense or cost to not just regulation and security, but now also trying to find value to these data. So we think it's time to have to build up a framework or propose a framework where the trust and it can be reestablished between users and companies, where the quality of data will be much better, because on both hands there will be a good understanding of how it is traded, how it is collected, and how it is protected. Both hands wants to have understand the reason why there is data. This is the fuel. This is the currency on the internet, but it's not treated as a proper currency, where if you don't have trust, you don't have a currency. So that's what we're trying to establish, a framework where personal data can be collected, exchanged, trade, and controlled properly.
So you're talking about personal data and information that we have available on the internet. So with that respect, so how do you gather that information, and why would I want to store the data with you rather than, say, with Facebook?
Well, the thing is that with us and with our architecture, you don't give us any data. It's a fully distributed platform. So the data are only going from one point to another point, the other point being the one you want to share your data with. It could be an individual or it could be a company. When a company share data with you, they're going straight to you. We only providing the backbones, basically, all the pipes in a fully distributed network. So it's a peer-to-peer network with a lot of protocols in terms of encryption, security, obfuscation, etc. And on top of that, an element of a blockchain for following the transaction and make sure that there's a third party showing what happened with these data and what happened with the control of these data.
Let's say I have some information that my personal information, maybe my address, maybe date of birth, and maybe even very private information like nationality and that data. So that data would be stored on the blockchain, or would it be stored on my computer?
That's a very good question as well. It's only going to be stored on the device, or the device of you, or the device of the other node. Could be a server, could be your bank server, or something like that. So there is no storage of the data on the chain itself or on the ledger. There is pointers to the data. There is pointers to who can, these elements of who can use it, etc., or how is that being used, or in the transaction, because we can monetize these exchange. But the data already remains from one point to another. There's nothing in central, in the blockchain itself. That would be problem with privacy, of course, and that's why and that's the reason why we developed our own chain, which is what we call a permission-based blockchain. So we were able not to have the data in the blockchain.
You have your own blockchain, but the data is actually not stored on a blockchain. It's stored on my device. So I've seen that you have an Android app out already. So I can start filling in my data on my device, and then potentially if someone wants to request that data, then it'll be from my device. So I have to be online at the same time then, is that correct?
It is and it's not. That means we have ways to allow by a proxy that you allow to have the control and the data themselves and the control rules that you put on them can be, of course, it's all encrypted, etc., but can be shared by proxy. So if you happen not to be online at the same time, it still can be used, and you will see all of that is tracked, of course, on the ledger.
So let's say I share that data. Will that data now be stored on their servers, or will it only be on a proxy at my device? So eventually, who has the ownership?
Yes, the data is always yours. So it's up to you to decide. Do you just share the certification about the data? That means to check that yes, it exists and that's the way it is, or you allow to have an upload or download of your data. That's remain into your hands. So you can sometimes, and more actually, and that's more efficient as well. If there is a request about the data, a query, then you don't need to. You just check, and the feedback is yes or no, or maybe. And so you don't have to transfer the data. You don't have to own the data. And that's the beauty of the system as well, is that when we talk to companies, we tell them that they don't have to own the data. They still can use the data with your permission, of course. Right. But not. They don't have to collect it and to protect it, etc., etc.
Okay, so say for example, it's a KYC form, maybe an exciting ICO or something like that. So I have my passport information, maybe it's verified. So I don't have to surrender that information. Perhaps I can just make sure that's a check mark next to my name.
Exactly.
And then we won't have any of these potential scary leaks we've seen. So in that sense as well, is there a data protection privacy as well? Because my fear is that even though I don't have to send it, they will require me to send it, because otherwise they won't give me a service or something like that. Is there any data protecting me or data protecting laws right now that would enforce that protection?
Well, there's a few things. You're absolutely right. Some companies still will require to have it. And that's mainly not because the company wants it. It's mainly because auditors or regulators have to have. So, but we're talking with regulators all the time to make them understand that actually, as long as you have the ledger with the pointer where the data are and the credential regarding these data, because that's the most important part as well. And then basically the check mark saying I checked and the result was positive and it's updated, etc., that should be enough. So it's going to take a few years before regulators eventually understand that, and it's a sort of zero proof authentication. So, okay. But it's so technically it's doable. It's going to take a little bit of time. Now, you can always, with our system, disconnect from any kind of sharing. So if you're uncomfortable with any kind of sharing, and it goes granularly to each data, you can say yes, no, anonymously with these ones, but not these ones, etc.
So I have like full control over who I'm sharing with. See, that's kind of like the biggest concern because, well, let's say if my data has been submitted, verified, and checked by some company and they're using it, and suddenly they get audited, they need to go verify that again. So is there potentially another request, say if the auditors audit the company that I'm submitted data to, would they come back to me and say, hey, look, we're being audited, we need that data now? Would I be notified of this?
They could, and we see all different cases for the moment. Again, because it's still brand new, and regulators are not the most upfront people in terms of technology. So they have to understand, and that's fine. I think it's our role with some other companies to sit down with them and help them to understand how it works. So, but yes, they can definitely ask the ledger to the companies to make sure that they did things properly. The same way, if you in Europe, by example, if you decide not to share or it's called the right to be forgotten. If you want to actionate that right and the company doesn't do it, it's going to be written in the ledger, so they won't be compliant. So it's normal that regulator asks for the ledger, and that's part of the service we provide to the companies. But after that, would they go back to you as well? In some cases, yes. Okay. Most likely randomly. We've seen that. Sorry to interrupt, but we've seen that with our own ICO, where we establish a very strong KYC, AML process, etc. And they did randomly. They said the banks where we deposit the funds, etc., start to say, okay, did you go through the whole process of goals, blah blah blah, and then they randomly say, could you show me that you did that for XYZ? But it was more a test, nothing to do personally with this or this person.
Right. It's just a kind of a spot check to make sure that you did exactly what you did. Okay. With that respect, so we can fill the information in. Like, what sort of applications and who would use this kind of service in the future?
We have two ways. One is B2B2C, and you mentioned KYC. We provide service for banks internally already, because most of the time each department goes through a whole new process of KYC, because departments don't talk to each other. And now we provide the backbone where they can initiate the KYC, certify, etc., and put some rules about automatic update, etc. And now they can share between departments of the same banks or same other states or stuff like that. So that's already one thing. And they can give access to their customer, their own KYC. So the onboarding, sharing, and then sharing back to the customers to make sure that they agree to share these data. So that's one of the service we provide to business, basically. Now, as an individual, and that's not just KYC, but it's very simple to understand with KYC. For an individual, we will provide in a few months what we call the token wallet. And the token wallet is exactly, I think you mentioned that quickly before, is as an individual, you want to invest in a few exciting ICOs coming on, etc. And every single time, maybe not now, but in the future, you will have to go through a KYC, AML process, etc., because that's going to be a regulation all over the world. You don't want to do that. It's like opening an account in a bank every single day. You're not going to do that. I mean, it's a pain in the neck. So you will have in your token wallet from Pixio, you will have your first process of KYC done, certified, either by Pixio itself and by your bank, because you can connect with your bank account. So we verify a few things to make sure that they also went through. So that's reinforce the value of your KYC. And from there, you will be able to apply and to purchase from all the different ICOs that we will enroll in that program. So that's going to be a great customer experience, so to speak, a personal experience, not to have to repeat that. And for the ICO issuers, that's going to be access to a pool of already certified people or KYC people, without having to go to the burden for doing it. So that's just an example of what you can do with a very simple set of data. Because KYC is pretty simple set of data. If you add more, if you add proof of revenue, you can apply to several credit applications without having to refill the thing all the time and have to certify the documents, ask your employer to certify your payslips or things like that. And then if you want to apply to mortgage, same thing. You can, and you build up your wallet with more and more data that through the chain and through the connectors that we provide are certified and update, and we keep them update, and that will make your every single onboarding experience much easier.
Right.
And for business, less risk of fraud, better customer experience, faster onboarding. So it's a big saving on the processing time.
Actually, I think I have an idea of how this works. So I had to open a bank account before, but it was like cross kind of cities, and then getting one bank to communicate with the other bank was such a pain. I had to basically run to the bank I was with and get these certified documents, and there were specific like chops and seals and the specific process they need to do to make sure that these documents are like valid, and then they send it to the other bank. But when I was even getting that data, none of the agents knew like what I needed. They're like, okay, there's a checklist. It was meant to be easy, but then they didn't know how to do it. So
it's never.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess in that sense, later on, you can just like use the Pixio wallet, and if it has already the data inside, I can just say, okay, go verify that, boom,
exactly,
and then into the bank you go. So it's like it has a lot of future applications here. It's just the case that right now we don't immediately see it because the banks technically we do it a few times, but not always.
I'll give you an example with healthcare. I mean, anytime you go to a doctor, you have to sign this form of HIPAA. That of course they're going to lose every
Right.
Rewrite your name. Most of the time with my name in the US, they always put an S or something in addition, so they always miss the point. It's a huge waste of your time. It's kind of upsetting. It's a huge waste for the insurance companies as well, and for the doctors to have doing that. I mean, it could be much simpler if you had a patient ID that you just say, or Pixio ID, you say, go, and yes, I check HIPAA or not HIPAA, and that's done. So you can save for yourself a lot of aggravation. And trust me, right. I'm not a very patient person, so I'm really upset when I have to do all that. And for companies, organization, a lot of processing time, which is pure waste of money.
We talked a little bit about this before, but I really want to explore this in a little bit of detail. So we have the data stored in kind of proxies, and then technically I still own it. And how does that kind of fully work? How do I protect the proxies from being hacked or breached or whatnot?
That's why it's important to understand that our solution is there is a layer of blockchain, but there's also several other layers that can come to complement that. We have several layers of protection, and protection to, in particular, to the source of the data. Because as we said, it's important to have the data not on the chain, but distribute. But on the other hand, you want to make sure that if an intruder comes on the network, doesn't know where the data are from, because otherwise then although they're encrypted, you still have a risk on the data. So we have a technology that we call Matryoshka that it's pretty complex, like 3D, virtual 3D kind of wall stuff, where we mask completely the origin of the data. And so nobody can find the IP address where the data comes from, or even the path that has been taken by that data to eventually get out. So that was a very it's a strong part of our technology here, on top of the peer-to-peer network itself. So it's a combination of these three that makes something pretty robust in terms of platform.
Why did you choose to have your own blockchain instead of just using a public ledger?
Well, because first of all, when I started that project a long time ago, first of all, nobody was really interested. And actually, there was no blockchain. Or the very first one that came was Bitcoin. And I read it. I thought it was extremely fantastic. But I said, that's not appropriate for what I want to do. So we were really starting with rebuilding a peer-to-peer system and then all the protocols I mentioned. And then it's only a few years after, when I met Joy, who became one of the co-founders, where he said, maybe we could use blockchain, but we have to do it a little bit differently. We have to do a permission-based blockchain. And I said, tell me, what does that mean? So he explained to me. I was actually a bit doubtful at the beginning because it's never been done before. So he did it, and it works perfectly well. So we had to do our own to make sure that we offer kind of benefit of both worlds. It's an open blockchain, but in a special, ecosystem that's controlled by the consortium of that blockchain.
And what sort of technology is it based on? Is this based on Bitcoin, Ethereum, or like variants like a permission blockchains out there, or is it special by itself?
I think it's special. It became special by itself. We came back to Bitcoin initially, but also we recognized that we needed to have the equivalent of smart contracts because these are you need application running for this on specific set of data. It depends what it is. And so we kind of build up things completely on our own. So we do have the application like smart contract. We do have mining process, although it's not the same thing. And we do have the openness and closeness of the blockchain.
And then what is the purpose of the token then? So we have this identity on there. What is the use case of the token?
So the token, depending who's purchasing it. If it's for companies, these are tokens. They will need the token to actually purchase the data from another company. Or actually, they're not really buying the data, they're buying the certificate about that data. By example, a retailer that wants to use a KYC that's been performed by a bank about you in order to onboarding you, so they're going to save time and risk of fraud, etc. They will compensate the bank a few tokens for the certificate about your data. You're the one sharing the data, but the bank shared the certificate about these data. So they're going to need tokens for that. As an individual, you might also need tokens to pay certification about some of your data. It could be, we're discussing with RMV here in the US for issuing, whenever they issue the new license for you, when you come to renew, you will have the option. It's not done yet, so unfortunately, but that's what we're working on. Issue also on the PikcioChain, so you can have it immediately certified. You're going to pay a few, either box or a few tokens. These are things like that. Now, you also will be able to use your token as an individual if you want to be part of our mining program, which is, we have a proof of usage, which is the OR proof into the consensus. And we'll, so far we're mining everything, but we will open the mining, not resource, but possibilities, opportunities to token owners. And so they will have to auction it. So there's several ways to use the token.
So we also have this kind of idea of a marketplace as well. So I saw that you were talking about data marketplace. So how does that work? Because that always it confuses me a bit because I don't really want to sell my data. But is there any incentive for me to do so?
And you're right. You don't really want to sell your data. What you know is that data are sold all the time about you and collected without you. So, but on the other hand, it's rarely another individual buying this data. It's a business. So the market is really business to business and with the individual in the middle. So for us, it's always these three parts. It's business to customer. It needs to be part of the transaction. Now, who's going to pay the company purchasing the data and the certificate about these data? That's important. Who's going to receive some money? The one giving the certificate, because that's a process and they went through pain to do that, like banks, etc. Could be somebody else, and the individual. Now, the individual receive. How do we make sure they receive something every single time? Is through the mining process. So whenever we're mining the transaction around around the data or the set of data. We charge the purchaser, of course, and the seller, and and portion of this fee is going back to you as an individual. So it comes anytime there is something going. We basically in the same boat because we actually don't have any kind of central stuff. We just run the clearinghouse in the back, and then you get a cut every single time.
So if it's a B2B transaction, I'll still get a cut. And in terms of data sharing, they just share the certificate. So technically,
Exactly.
If they want to really request the data, they will still have to go through my approval or whatnot.
The triggering event of any kind of transaction, it's always you. That means it's you saying, okay, I have data here that got certified. You can use it, but you have to enter into the transaction with it.
Okay. And we've seen a few competitor projects before, like Civic, like the Key. So how would you compare yourself to these projects?
I think the major difference is what I just explained. That means they're mainly, and again, I'm not criticizing. I'm saying the difference. I think they're doing a great job as well. It's just a different option. They're going for what's called a sovereign identity. That means you as an individual would just go B2C or C2B and then try to establish some kind of relationship. Our approach is a little bit different based on either experience or surveys we did or entrepreneurial choice, that we do think that it's B2B2C and it has to be three parts in here, because I think the flow, at least if you want to build a business, there is no monetization possible as an individual. I'm not going to come to you and say, you can use the Pixio wallet, but you have to pay me. I mean, I could try, but it's not going to fly very far. But I'm an entrepreneur, so I have to find a way to monetize the thing. And the monetization, as we just said, is between business. So you have to find a way to solve a pain point for the business, so they're going to pay you. And they're going to pay you around customer data. And as I mentioned initially, there is enough pain point or challenges they have to address around customer data. So that's what we provide. And when we solve that problem, we actually involve you in a better control way. And so that's where it's beneficial for you as well as an individual. So it's a different business model or business approach. We're all talking about digital identity. We are talking about personal data, but in a very different business approach.
Awesome. So it's actually quite different from everyone else. And I think that's interesting, where you have the businesses passing pointers to each other, basically a certificate instead of the actual data. So in fact, your data is technically protected, and they still have to repoint everything back.
Even between business, they don't want to share data that way. It's very ambiguous that way.
Yeah.
But if they can share certificate, etc., that makes things happening much faster and much better thing, and actually in much more secure way as well.
Definitely. So I'm definitely going to look a little bit more into this project, and I hope the ICO goes really well with you guys. So I think,
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on this channel, and I hope all the best.
Thank you very much, Michael. Have a great day.
And thank you everyone so much for watching as well.